All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad you could join us here for the AEG Carbon League halftime show. We're going to get into sharing with you what an incredible group of leaders across over 6 U.S. cities and Puerto Rico have been working on as volunteers to deliver extraordinary results at what matters most. Welcome to the Carbon League halftime show. I'm your host, H.G. Chazelle, and I'll be walking you through what's happening with some incredible leaders across the country. So thanks again for being here. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and leaders, especially I'm excited about a special guest we have for us today to join us and talk with us about leadership and motivation, talking about what it takes to win at what matters most. So thanks again and welcome to the first launch of the Carbon League halftime show. Let's get in with a summary, kind of some context about why we do what we do here at Advanced Energy Group. Gosh, coming back and doing this reminds me of the days of COVID. That was only 5 years ago when we needed to find a way to communicate and deliver results and protect hundreds of thousands of people with our work in leadership. Well, we're going to utilize some of that technology and lessons we learned back in those days to get this started again about having an opportunity to communicate with you. So first, let's just jump in and give you a context of what is it exactly that Advanced Energy Group or AEG does and how it relates to the Carbon League. All right. So first, Advanced Energy Group is a convening platform set up to really address stakeholder engagement in a new way. Back in 2016, I was just struck by how important it was for us to come together to have a chance at delivering on some of the most altruistic, critical promises and commitments that I had ever heard, taking a city to zero carbon in less than 20 years, finding ways to decarbonize our transit system, finding ways to address energy inequalities so that people can afford to cover their energy bills and move forward in a way that cities really could see a better future for the millions of people that call those cities home. That was the inspiration for why I started Advanced Energy Group. I think it pulled a little on my architecture background that you've got to create the right frameworks and structure to have the experiences that you want. And what I didn't see happening was stakeholder engagement, was that we had a framework for mobilization. You can engage a lot of stakeholders and still get nothing accomplished. We don't have time for that right now. We need to mobilize and deliver on critical promises. Our model is supported by nearly 70 public, private, and civic organizations and companies to convene leaders to win at what matters most. We run these challenges. They're typically 4 hours long. We run them quarterly in Chicago, New York, Boston. We're launching Philadelphia in August. We do this work in the DMV region. We did East St. Louis this year. We're launching San Antonio in October. We've had an opportunity to run these stakeholder challenges in multiple venues, all with the critical aim of getting people on the field as teams to deliver real impact on critical issues. So here's just an example of the sponsors that support our work. I thank you, each one of you, if you're on and listening, for the support you've given us. We've been able to grow over the nearly 10 years with our organization as a result of your support. Other thing to notice is you can't really find one source of gravity to our sponsors. We've got hospitals, we have aquariums, transit systems, utilities, all are supporting us to convene leaders to get the job done. So how does it work? Our methodology is a 3-part competition. The first part of the competition in our playbook is prioritize on one focus. We can have a theme of clean transportation or grid modernization or critical infrastructure, but there can be multiple priorities. But if we don't agree on what is the one critical point of focus as a cross-sector convening body of stakeholders, we can't really play together as a team to drive impact and progress. Someone told me the problem is in this world, there is not one problem. And that's a huge detriment to our ability to work together as teams to deliver results. If we don't agree what a goal is, we can never get on the field together. So part 1 of our process is a speaker challenge where speakers have 8 minutes, 5 slides to articulate what they feel is the critical obstacle that a room of their peers need to focus on to deliver a critical impact. Once that's been determined and agreed upon, We go to the next phase, which is the playbook or the roundtable challenge, where at tables, leaders have 30 minutes to develop what they think is the most impactful response to the agreed upon obstacle the room has chosen to make an impact on. These tables need to agree, and then they need to pitch what they see as the best 12-month approach and 90-day sprint to deliver an impact on that critical obstacle. The room will vote and decide which table came up with the best play to go after that obstacle. And once that's been agreed, we get to the final part of our 4-hour challenge, which is the task force challenge, or we call it the sprint. This is where I ask the room of 48, 64 leaders, now that you agree on a problem, and now that you agree on an approach, who is willing to get on the field as a volunteer and get the job done? And that's where we get our teams volunteering to get out there and get this work done together. It's exciting to see how many leaders volunteer to get out there on the field and get these things done and actually hold themselves accountable to deliver these wins. When these leaders volunteer to join these task forces, they officially become a member of the Carbon League. The Carbon League is a 501c nonprofit that we built as a framework to support these leaders volunteering their time and resources to deliver these needed wins. This nonprofit is run by and supported primarily by graduate students across multiple universities that provide support to these volunteer task forces to deliver these wins, making sure that they're making the meetings, getting meeting minutes, looking for grants that they might apply for to get funding to support the intentions of these task forces. And we're really excited to kind of tie these two together. We do believe systemic change is best approached as a team sport. So we're here today for the halftime show to talk about wins so far. We're halfway through the 2025 season. How are we doing? Well, we've had 13 AEG action challenges or workshops. And in those 13 action challenges, over 200 leaders have volunteered to join task forces and deliver 90-day sprints and 12-month wins. So far, the results are in. So far, 6 90-day sprints have been achieved and 4 12-month wins have been achieved in 2025 alone. So I'd like to take a pause and acknowledge and appreciate all those leaders across Puerto Rico, New York, Chicago, East St. Louis. The list goes on, who've put their time in to deliver these wins. Take a look at some of these leaders who are out there playing to win. I love watching that video and just seeing all the leaders who are engaged in this. I'd like to bring us over now so you get to meet our Midwest Carbon League director. He started as a AEG fellow, started supporting task forces, and then worked with me closely to stand up the Carbon League as a nonprofit. He's a PhD student on, chemical engineering and special applied materials. Michael, I'm excited to bring you on now and talk about your work with the Midwest Carbon League as the director supporting task forces. Let me find you here in our waiting room and bring you on. Welcome, welcome. I see you got a special jersey on. I can't wait to talk about that.
Of course. Yeah,
Nice.
got to rep the home team, HG. I'm excited. I got our special Chicago Carbon League jersey on, and I'm here to share some of the major wins that we've gotten here in Chicago and the kind of supporting the Midwest. I'm posting a link to the chat, but overall, I'm really today I'm representing the work of my team. 7 different fellows from Northwestern, DePaul University, as well as 4 undergraduate volunteers have done constant work in the background to get us to where we are today. And we cannot thank them enough for their kind of volunteering and their leadership in this role. So with that in mind, to really dive into it, I'm going to highlight two of our task forces, both on clean transportation and how those kind of move forward. The first is this really major 90-day sprint win from our clean transportation task force. This has been a problem focusing on clean bus infrastructure in Chicago with the Chicago Transit Authority, CTA, and ComEd, really putting this forward and serving as task force leads to move this forward. And really what this 90-day sprint was, and this initial idea was, how do we build more effective bus corridors in Chicago, and where are the best places to build them? So these lovely volunteers you see on the right here have been working hard on this year. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that they've identified, we put all this information together into a single GIS map with support of kind of Esri and all these other kind of players and our stakeholders, taking a lot of data, putting it all together to identify 2 priority bus corridors that we want to focus on in South Chicago. Both of these bus corridors are serving disadvantaged communities and environmental justice communities in the area. And these, based on several convenings and different types of data analysis stuff, we've been able to bring it all together, kind of really say these are going to be the areas of most impact to focus on right away. Of course, we want to build more than just 2, but we want to start figuring out how we can actually build that. So that was the first successful 90-day sprint, selecting these 2 corridors. The next 90-day sprint for these stakeholder these leaders and our volunteers is meeting with city leaders on July 24th. It's scheduled, it's going to happen, and the conversation is going to be, how do we build these 2 corridors that we've selected? And I'm also going to put a lovely map that they built that's all interactive, so you can see all the different data pieces in the chat on LinkedIn for how this all came together. Now, luckily, we also have another really major announcement when it comes to clean transportation, and that is our Port Decarbonization Task Force and the outcome from last year. So we had this really big dinner about a little over a year ago, on April 16th, bringing a ton of people together to focus on how do we look to decarbonize the International Illinois Port District, bringing a ton of stakeholders together, and especially around this EPA Clean Ports opportunity that was out at the time. So we got a whole partners of the port together to go after this massive federal grant up to $100 million. And the really big win here is that, if you go to the next slide, is that we were able to get the funding. So we worked with the Illinois EPA, CPKC, the International Illinois Port District, put together this lovely application to look at how do we start that process of building, electric infrastructure, hydrogen locomotives, all these different things at the port. And we are happy to announce that that funding has been awarded to the state and dispersed to the port. So the Port District officially has that funding in their bank account, which is awesome. So we can now start the process of thinking about, as a city, how do we start to build this 5-year project to really put the city of Chicago on track to decarbonize their port infrastructure. This is a really exciting win. I think this really goes to show what can happen from these 9-day sprints going into a 12-month goal. And overall, this is entirely driven by our fellows, who are kind of the leaders, keeping these task forces on track, keeping things moving forward. And if you're at all interested in, or you have anybody you recommend to become a fellow, we are always looking for more assistance. So feel free to apply today at our website that we'll put in the chat here as well.
Thank you, Michael. It's been extraordinary, your leadership. How many fellows do you have working with the Midwest Carbon League?
Right now, we have 7 fellows.
You have 7 fellows, and then you've got graduate fellows, and then you've got even undergrads wanting to get engaged because they hear about this work. Why are graduate students getting involved with the Carbon League in the Midwest? How has this been beneficial to them?
I think for what I see for a lot of young people, they are definitely looking for a way of, how do I work to solve these big problems? As kind of you mentioned, HG, there's a big complex problems where it's kind of hard to find a space to fill, to really feel like you're making an impact. And for a lot of the fellows that I work with, they are extremely happy that they can find a place that they can make a direct impact in their communities while learning those professional skills right now, right? The idea that we're working in 90-day sprints and year-long goals, not on these like 10-year projects, which also are important. I think that's really attractive to the young people, where they're trying to see, how do I make a difference today? And that type of vision and drive for them is what makes these projects so successful.
I'm helping drive a $72 million award for the electrification and decarbonization of the Port of Chicago, working with the Chief Innovation Officer from the CTA. These all are incredible opportunities where those who care deeply about their future, who are invested in it in terms of education, can actually go to the front lines with more senior leaders and support them together in achieving something important. I think it's incredible. I'm so grateful to know all the fellows, and I think it's a testament to how much we work together, that it's not that I know them as a fellow, I know them by their names, I know them by their passions and what they bring to the table. So it's been extremely rewarding. And stay tuned. And if you want to support the Midwest Carbon League, you can go to the carbonleague.org website, learn more about what they're doing, get involved if you're a graduate student. And as a 501c3, we are open to some funding and donations to help these task forces continue their work. They're doing good things, and I really am prioritizing the opportunity for them to get some stipends from the efforts they put in. So thank you, Michael. We'll come back and talk more about the fellowship program, but we've got some more good news to share today on this call. We're going to pivot from here to the Mid-Atlantic, Carbon League Mid-Atlantic, and we're going to hear from Chris Zimmerman and Tyler Wicca, who are on there. Chris, let me bring you on, Tyler. Tyler is the lead DMV fellow. He's at the George Washington University, and he'll be talking about his experience as a Carbon League fellow. And then I'll bring on Chris Zimmerman, who is the lead executive on the task force, working with Tyler to bring forth an incredible 12-month win. It looks like you're right on the cusp of delivering it. Actually, you have. So let me get out of the way and let you talk about it. I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, HG, and welcome everybody to this great effort by the Carbon League, first ever, I believe. So our task force, as you can see there, the critical obstacle was taking a look at how do we modernize the grid? How do we get at the campus level? And that's what we did for our 90-day sprint. We said, hey, we want to be able to take advantage of advanced grid technologies, including thermal energy networks, which are up and coming. They're around, but they're not as ubiquitous as they should be, in our opinion. So we needed to figure out a way to do that. And when we started our meetings, we looked at data. How are we going to, what kind of data do we need to collect? Who needs to be involved? Experts from across the industry, as well as looking at funding opportunities and how does the industry take this all into account, and what's the appetite for industry to do this? So talking about stakeholders, and who we have involved, I'll pass it over to Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm the fellow at the DMV working with this task force, and you can see there on the right a picture of all the stakeholders that volunteered to be a part of this effort back last July. There we have some folks from the DoD. We have Joint Base Andrews, of course. Chris is in the picture, but also some people from the Naval Postgraduate School, the ESTCP, Environmental Security and Technology certification program, and a ton of others. There's the local campuses like Georgetown and GWU, and then some utilities in there. And I'd like to highlight all of that just to say that these people were only a fraction of the folks in the room, and they all volunteered to push this effort forward. One of the most important people in the room, of course, were people that were familiar with deploying TENS. So that includes people like Audrey Schulman from Heat Labs, which is the company that was spun off of HEAT. It's an NGO working up in New England to deploy thermal energy networks in the grid up there and prove that they're economically viable. They have a project with National Grid that's running right now, and I was excited to be able to work with them. But for the people who aren't so familiar with TENS, we do have a little explanation on what a thermal energy network is right after this slide.
Great, cool, Tyler. Hey, thanks very much for all your, especially for you and all your hard work and wrangling all those stakeholders together every 2 weeks and in between. So good on you. Hey, I just want to let everybody know I'm not an engineer, but this is the way thermal energy networks kind of work on a campus-based scenario. So you have a multiple array of different buildings that you see up there. So you have a data center, you've got a university, dorms, hospital, churches, residential, etc. All need varying levels of heat and cooling depending on the time of year. Unless you're at the equator, and then it's always cooling. But up in the mid-Atlantic here, we've got really cold winters and we've got really hot summers, which we're experiencing now in the 90s and lower 100s. So how do we balance that? So if you take a thermal energy network, which is basically taking either cold water and circulating it and storing it in the ground as cold water, because as you get below about 15 feet or so underneath the ground, it basically keeps the water at the same temperature, all year round. So when we do that, we start to cycle the water during the peak areas using a very, very cheap pump network. That way we don't use as much energy and we can keep those energy costs down, and we can actually improve the efficiency of the heating and cooling for all those buildings. And for example, you've got a data center, right? Data center puts out a lot of heat. and hospitals need heat to make sure that their patients are comfortable. They balance that with cool, obviously, in the summer, but that's where we can start to use the storage, the shallow pits that you see there, or the boreholes, to store those cool water requirements. And we take the AC units, the coolers and the chillers that are located in these big buildings, and actually cool that water and pull it off during non-peak hours to resupply the cooling system. Opposite happens for heating, so we can pull heating off the data center and then dump it into any one of those buildings that you see up there in residential, etc. Beauty about this is that it doesn't have to happen on a military base where we have lots of land to be able to work on this. But at GWU, the George Washington University in downtown DC, there is a way that we can actually have piping underground to keep these and use it as a basically like an electrical system, where buildings, as they become ready to go for thermal energy networks, can actually plug into it and get their heating and cooling. We're not there yet. The infrastructure is in design, but we're working hard to do that, and that was the part of our challenge for this 12-month cycle. Tyler, over to you.
Yeah, so
the
to
RFI.
accomplish this goal, yeah, I can talk a little bit. So as Chris said, thermal energy networks, they're this exciting technology that's new and it's upcoming. And we want to deploy them on campuses. It's better when you have multiple buildings that can trade energy with each other. So at the stakeholder convening, we came together and we're like, how do we overcome that obstacle? How do we get more TENS networks and campuses? And we decided with their two major campus stakeholders, GWU and Joint Base Andrews, let's try to push out an RFI, a solicitation to industry that could get information that's critical to developing these projects. So over the following months, we got all those stakeholders that you saw in those pictures to come together in 4 different teams. They brainstormed data requirements, funding pathways, ways to assess developer appetite, and how to engage stakeholders. What should we ask these people, these entities that would respond, how they would implement this project with local stakeholders. The information that we gathered from those events, we honed down into an RFI, request for information. And the RFI, it just went out. It was released on June 16th. I'm happy to announce that it will be out until July 25th. So if you're interested in replying to the RFI, it's rfi.reply@thecarbonleague.org. And I'm happy to report that so far we've had a very healthy showing of interest. There's some larger contracting companies and some engineering firms that I'm excited for the range of responses that we'll get, and the teams that we'd be able to build, or at least the information we're able to present to Joint Base Andrews and GW on the potential for them to save energy on these types of projects. But yes, we're still accepting responses. So please, we have a Q&A session July 18th. You send an email there, we'll get you signed up. But yeah, it's been a wild ride this past year. I'm happy to have been a part of this task force, and I'm thankful for the leadership, Chris. It really is ebbing and flowing when you're on these teams, and we've had some vital participation from key stakeholders from GW and from Joint Base Andrews that have just kept it going. So I think, I definitely, is there one more slide here? I have to talk about the experience. That's all right. There's not one more slide. I'll just talk. I am happy personally to have been on a team that advances sustainability at George Washington. I've been here for the last 5 years working on my undergrad and now master's, and it's been an amazing opportunity as a fellow with the Carbon League. CHG's on the screen now.
Well, I just want to thank you, Tyler. You've been an incredible leader, and you've brought in such other inspiring young leaders to the fellowship program, the Carbon League program from the George Washington University that have been actively engaged, supporting executives like Tyshawn and so many others. And the relationship we've made with the engineering department of the George Washington University has been outstanding, all the way going back to some of the earlier PhDs that were engaged here. So I really am excited about the partnership there and how it's growing with GWU. We're excited that on July 8th, George Washington University will be hosting our Grid Optimization Stakeholder Challenge. We have an incredible lineup for that event. We've got Commissioner Linton from Maryland. We have Commissioner Trabue from the DC Public Service Commission, leadership represented from PEPCO, BG&E, Exelon, WSP, and many others are coming to this event. I just heard that we'll have an exciting leader from DOD participating also. So great to see the level of engagement growing and the interest in this format to really get things done together. So I really appreciate it, that everything both of you have done. We'll make sure that the link to the carbonleague.org is available. I think maybe Jess is able to put that in the chat so you can see it. Part of me wants to see if I could pull up the website now, but go to it, thecarbonleague.com, and you'll see the RFI and you'll see the instructions on how to respond. So thanks again to you both. I'm excited to see next steps. It's amazing what you can accomplish in less than 12 months when you're aligned and committed to a win with a broad array of stakeholders. So well done to you both. All right. Well, we're not done. I thought this was the perfect moment, as now you get a better understanding of what these teams are working to accomplish, both in 90-day sprints and then also 12-month objectives. So this represents a 12-month win with this RFI getting out in less than 12 months. I thought this is where I wanted to go to a special break and bring in a special guest to talk about leadership, talk about motivation, and this concept of playing to win at what matters most. Again, we believe systemic change is best addressed as a team sport. Why team sports? Because team sports are proactive. Often on systemic change, we have two choices. We either wait until things get so bad that we realize we need to mobilize. COVID, unfortunately, was a good example. Most critical storms, et cetera, are examples of when we see mobilization among the right cross-section of leaders to get something done in response to something. But rarely do you see leaders coming to lean in and get ahead on things. But you do see it in professional sports, team sports. And so my next guest is someone I've been so grateful to get a chance to get to know. And I'm excited to bring him on to the program today to talk about his experience winning at what matters most. So Chris and Tyler, thank you. Stay on, because we're going to try to bring you back on later in the segment here, but I very much appreciate what you've been able to bring to the table here. All right, so let's get ready for a transition here. And so bringing onto the stage here with me, Edgar Jones, 7-year NFL veteran and professional speaker who is joining me. We had an opportunity to meet through one of our top sponsors, ELM, through Aaron Bowman, who said, I know what you're doing, HG, and you've just got to meet Edgar Jones. He is so locked in on the importance of approaching leadership from a team sport mentality, and has an extraordinary background in his work. Please get a chance to meet him. We got to meet in San Antonio in person, and ever since then, we've been just talking and figuring ways to collaborate more. Edgar, would you please just provide an introduction, kind of how you got to this moment today? And I've got some questions for you around motivation and playing to win as a team sport.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks, HG, for having me. Short background about myself and how I got to this moment. Originally from Louisiana, went to school, Southeast Missouri State, and was fortunate enough to play in the NFL. My signing bonus was 1,000 quarters, $250. All right, so I wasn't a guy that walked across the stage with Roger Goodell. My journey in what I am doing now, as far as a speaker and coach, that really started before I got into the NFL. I had some amazing women and men that poured into my life that showed me, at that time, it didn't make sense, but they showed me what leadership looked like. And then throughout my playing time, especially in the NFL, I had a chance to see what great leadership looked like and how performing teams and how they continue to sustain and grow. And then I also had a front row seat to what that doesn't look like, the wrong ingredients of what leadership should not look like and how performing teams. So I've had an interesting view on both sides of it.
And let me just go here for a second. Well, my first question for you is, you decided to go into motivational speaking. What was a message you felt was important to bring to the world of executives and leaders from what you learned in sports?
Yeah, great question. I would say a little bit more than just motivation. It's really there's nothing new underneath the sun. My grandfather used to always say that. So to get them to rethink something that they probably had already heard, or maybe they had saw before. So just reframing it a different way. HG, a couple of weeks ago, I was driving in Dallas. That's where I live at. And I was on the interstate. And the interstate speed is 70. So I ended up getting off and I continue to drive. And all of a sudden I see some red and blue lights. So I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
So I parked my car roll down the window, give the officer my license, and I says, "Officer, if you don't mind me asking, what was the reason and why you pulled me over?" And he was like, "You were on the highway and you got off." And I was like, "Yes, the speed limit was 50." And he was like, "Yes, it was 50 until you got in the school zone. The speed limit was 20."
Oof.
So for me, similar to that, when I go in and go speak, my objective is to take leaders from a interstate speed to a school zone pace. How can we go from 70 to 20 by taking the time to first slow down? It's a different in speed on the interstate and the school zone. The best high performers that I have been around, can you hear that background?
It's fine.
The best high performers I've been around, and the difference from week one, once we get into the playoffs, is we first take the time to slow down, to ask ourselves a couple questions. First, where's my focus at right now? Like, exactly where am I focusing in on? And whatever I am focusing in on, is it taking me away from the objective and the goal, or is it pulling me further away from that?
Interesting. That aligns well with the first part of our stakeholder challenge, where we have speakers come and they only get 8 minutes and 5 slides to present what they feel should be the critical point of focus for a room full of leaders representing regulators, utilities, large energy users, city officials, state officials, and say, look, we are all here. The hard part was getting us in this room. The important part is what we do with the fact we're in this room. And if we don't have focus, we can't operate together. And that requires actually slowing down, I think, to your point.
Yeah, and HG, it's counterintuitive to what society tells us to do. You know, there was a point in time where you would give a restaurant a bad review because the food was bad. Now we give a bad review to a restaurant because the service was slow, not necessarily because the food was bad. So it's counterintuitive, but there's so much power to be able to slow down, to say, what distractions have I allowed to take priority over what matters most? And then in that, what are we truly capable of? And what would that look like if we gave more focus to that? So individually wise, I ask myself that question. And then from a team aspect, like, what are we truly capable of?
Well, that was where I was going to go next, is once you've got that sense of focus and motivation and you're grounded in your why, right, individually, bringing that to your team so that every member of that team stays grounded in that focus and why, in terms of where you're going and why you're trying to achieve your objective. What's interesting to me with these 209 leaders that are across 13 teams right now, all volunteers committed to delivering 90-day sprints, which they have agreed are critical to accomplish. The challenge, though, right, is that they're volunteers. They're doing this, and they're often senior leaders in companies who feel this is important, who embraced accountability to get these things done, and then they leave the room, and life comes back, right? And work comes back. And then all of a sudden, making that time for that meeting every 2 weeks to keep this moving forward becomes harder. What have you learned when being on a team, whether it was the Ravens or others, of secrets, leadership secrets to stay invested in the outcome when you could easily start to feel a little resigned? You know, you're at the end of the season. Do we even think about the playoffs? How did you see that was kind of successfully addressed in your experience?
Absolutely. Great question. So two things. First, I would go to the recommitment. You know, there's stages of attitude that we go through. We go through the excitement stage where we first start doing something and we're excited, we're thrilled. And then we go through the stage of frustration and reality. Like, this is serious. This is hard work. That's in the NFL, we go through that. And then we get to a point of the looking phase where we start looking for something different because the work we're doing, it's frustrating. The fourth phase is extremely important. It's the recommitment phase. And in the recommitment phase, what I've seen, especially in the Ravens organization, there's 3 things that's important. One is, let's go back to our why. Why are we doing this? What's the why behind the way? The second one is continuing to have the right people that's pouring into us. We are a team. So making sure we're encouraging each other and building each other up, because one of the things we can do is when the frustration and reality starts to happen, we go in our own little bubble, but going back to the team to encourage each other. And then looking at the small steps. The third thing is looking, what's the small steps and the things that we can take. And when I look at the small steps, the other thing I think about is complexity is the enemy of execution.
Wow. That's a good one.
Cheesecake Factory has too much on its menu. Okay. And I love Cheesecake Factory. But how can we simplify what it is that we're doing, or maybe some delegation, or like being able to say, hey, HG, I'm having a hard time with attacking this objective.
Yeah.
I need some help.
Keeping that communication open. Yeah.
And the effective communication.
And that's a muscle in itself, just getting good at it and training for that as much as you would, strength training is communication training. Those are insightful points.
Yeah.
The one I'd like to come back to after we get to hear from another two task force leaders is giving winning currency. In the NFL, it's easy. Currency for winning is everywhere. You've got all the visibility on ESPN and all the networks. Even the Super Bowl entertainers don't even expect to be paid because there's so much currency around this game that just the visibility is sufficient currency alone. When we try to have leaders like these 209 leaders right now committed to delivering these 90-day sprints on things like energy affordability, on things like energy security, these are critical issues that relate to lives that are at stake for getting this stuff right. How do we engender more currency for winning on these things that maybe there's some examples from sports that we could pull into this arena? Because when I think stakeholder mobilization, if I want to look at the best example, I look at the biggest arena that I can see and say, look, whatever they're doing is filling that arena with 30, 40, 50,000 people. Now, if you can do that on this issue, now you're talking in terms of making an impact, right? On grid reliability, on, critical infrastructure optimization. So something there in currency and finding a way to bring that out in this type of leadership would be powerful.
Yeah. No, another great question. You first have to define exactly what does winning look like. When you say winning can be broad. So it's like, we'll take it back to football, or what does winning in the first quarter look like? What does winning on the first down look like? What does winning in third down look like? What does winning if we're behind look like? So getting very, very specific into like, what does winning look like? And that's what I love about the title of just halftime. Because halftime is about adjustments.
Good point.
Halftime is about slowing down. Halftime is not about going fast. Halftime is about slowing down to look at like, okay, this was winning in the first and the second quarter. So now that it's halftime, what does winning look like for the third and the fourth quarter? And it comes back to, where has my focus been?
Right.
What exactly do we need to probably adjust to continue to make the adjustments we need to do to win in the third and the fourth quarter?
Or even stop losing.
Or even stop losing.
I mean, not everybody gets to have a Super Bowl like the Eagles. Just,
It's very
I had to put that in there.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I go back to the complexity is the enemy of execution. HG, in the beginning of training camp, we install over 120 plays. By the time we get to the postseason, by the time we get to week 12 and into the playoffs, we're probably running maybe 10 to 15 plays.
There you go. There's that
so
issue.
It's like we start here because in order to get quality, you have to have quantity. But then as we continue, like, how do we like start to really zero back in to focus and reduce as well?
That is a great point. I really like that. Because I mean, we run 40 stakeholder challenges a year across multiple cities. We run 3 to 4 in Puerto Rico alone every year. And it's a kind of a lot of information of watching leaders go at something. We have about a 55% win rate on 90-day sprints and 12-month wins. And I think you're right. Over time, you start to see patterns of, look, this works. In 90 days, try to accomplish this. Don't try to go too fancy with, creating a website or this or that. Just try to get that next meeting with more important people in the room. That'll create your momentum. You start to kind of hone in your playbook to what you can accomplish in 90 days that has tremendous impact and momentum.
Yeah.
Actually, the next leader that I'm going to bring on, Edgar, is a great example of this. And if you don't mind just hanging with us a little bit, I'll have her come on and then we'll wrap up and you'll get to meet some of these leaders. But I'd love to bring her on and share about her work. This is Claudia Villalman. She came, I got to spend time with her in Puerto Rico. She used to be in the New York City mayor's office, and now she has a leadership role with New York BEST, which is the New York State office focused on accelerating the development of batteries. Let me bring her on. I'm going to get to hear her story, and then we'll come back together and talk a little bit more to end things out. So hold on tight. Let me go to her right now. All right. There you are, Claudia. I see you. Bringing you in. Welcome, welcome.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
I was excited to have you. We had a great opportunity several years ago to have you come down to Puerto Rico for one of the initial Puerto Rico Energy Week launches. At the time, you had the connection with the mayor's office of New York City, and now you're in this exciting role with New York BEST. Do you want to just share about that, and I'll get your slides ready?
Yeah, sounds good. And it was such a pleasure to be able to go to the Puerto Rico Energy Week. As you remember, my grandparents lived about 10 minutes from the convention center, so I got to stay with them. And really, my experience with my family in Puerto Rico, living through Hurricane Maria, not having electricity for 10 months, was one of the key reasons that I wanted to come into the energy world. And I originally was in ecology and climate science, and then transitioned into energy policy because it's absolutely at the intersection of the problem and the solution. We know that the way that we generate energy now is contributing to the climate crisis, and the way that we can generate and store energy in the future can contribute to solutions and local resiliency. So it's very, very exciting space to work in. And as you mentioned, I now work for the New York Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium, or New York BEST, for the Energy Storage Trade Group for New York State. We've got about 180 members, mostly in the private sector, companies working on energy storage, ranging from manufacturing all the way up to developers, installers, operators of energy storage. But we also have some utilities, academia, and government in our membership as well. And we're basically working to advance energy storage as a critical solution for the clean energy transition here in New York State.
Excellent. Well, I've got some slides here for you. I will let you take it over and just talk about the challenge where you presented the winning obstacle statement, the one that galvanized the room to focus on, and kind of what the path you took to deliver your successful 90-day sprint.
Great. Yeah. So energy storage is kind of like the unsung hero of the clean energy transition. A lot of people know about solar, they know about wind, but don't necessarily know about energy storage. And energy storage is absolutely critical to helping us reduce reliance on fossil fuels and deliver clean air and health benefits that comes with, and support electrification of heating and transit, and support a more affordable energy transition. So especially in a place as dense as New York City, where I was born and raised, there's a lot of people with a lot of energy demand, and there's not very much room for renewables. Even if we blanketed the whole city in solar, we still wouldn't generate enough electricity to satisfy all the needs of New York City residents. So energy storage is very energy dense, and it can play a really critical role in making sure that clean electricity brought in from outside the city, whether that's from offshore wind or from clean energy generated upstate or Canada, making sure all of that clean power is available when we need it. One thing that's really critical and sort of shaped my experience working on energy storage when I was at the city was focused on safety. So very much in the weeds of the fire code, the building code, thinking about how do we ensure that as we install this technology that it's installed safely. And I had the pleasure of working with FDNY and the Department of Buildings, which are two authorities that have some of the strictest safety requirements in the country and probably in the world. So I guess that's a good thing, because we know that when projects get built in New York City, we can be confident that they are safe. But of course, permitting can be very difficult, very time consuming, and therefore projects can be expensive. So right now, the kind of easiest type of energy storage to permit in New York City are the larger projects that are built outdoors in vacant lots. So those are like the 3 to 5 megawatt size systems. But the smaller systems, the systems that can be integrated into buildings, into the built environment, on rooftops, et cetera, are still pretty rare in New York City. These are going to be absolutely critical to the grid of the future. You know, having load flexibility at the source is the most efficient way to have energy storage integrated in our system. But right now, it's not very easy to permit, not very viable, and very difficult to finance because they're so expensive. So my presentation at the AEG event last summer was all about how do we unlock this critical market segment, small commercial energy storage, or more simply, batteries for buildings. That was coined by EDC at one of our first workshops, batteries for buildings. So our first sprint as a task force was to hold a workshop, which we did last February, to bring together experts across the professional spectrum to talk about, okay, what do? We know there's a lot of challenges. How do we unlock this market sector? We were so happy that the workshop was sold out. I think we had like 90 or 100 people. Didn't expect that much. We could have used a bigger room potentially, but we had a really nice mix of people in the room and a mix of both presentations from experts as well as breakout discussions to focus on what we can collectively do to unlock this type of project in New York City. And we were so grateful to be able to work with AEG and have your leadership and support on this, given your expertise in planning really engaging and interactive workshops. So it was a really good success. Since February, at the end of the event, we had a number of people, as you can see in the photo, who signed up for our task force. And the task force grew pretty significantly between July and February. So it is now co-chaired by AEG New York Best, as well as Sustainable CUNY, which we brought into the loop, which has been fantastic. And shout out to AEG fellows, Kristen, Max, and Roberto for doing an amazing job keeping us on track. I guess some of the things that we could consider as wins coming out of the task force. So New York Best released our Batteries for Buildings guide, which explains how batteries can support compliance with Local Law 97, which is, for those who are not as familiar, the New York City law that places an emissions cap on large buildings. Sustainable CUNY also worked with partners in the city to develop a siting guide to give a better sense of which types of buildings are good candidates to site batteries on. And then we had a financing subgroup led by ELM and AEG, and they developed a heat map to show how zoning overlaid with disadvantaged community census tracts, overlaid with hosting capacity and floodplains and other criteria, can really help illustrate where batteries for buildings can have the greatest value. And then we've also been keeping in touch with our friends at FDNY and DOB to have them publish checklists on the steps needed to obtain permits for energy storage systems in this size class. So I guess a lot of those work streams were kind of advancing along parallel tracks, but having our regular check-in opportunities with the task force was really helpful to maintain momentum and excitement around the Batteries for Buildings topic and just kind of elevate it in the language around decarbonization happening in New York City. And then I guess in terms of next steps, we are recognizing that we have a nice cohort of people who are bought in for the need of this, but there's definitely a gap in awareness on the building owner side. For example, I was at a Local Law 97 Expo a few weeks ago, and we had a table with resources about batteries for buildings, and people would come by, and we had several people say, batteries for buildings, I thought that was illegal in New York City. I thought batteries weren't allowed. So we got the chance to be like, oh no, it's not illegal. It's just strictly regulated. And here's kind of the pathway that you can pursue if you are interested in getting batteries on your site. So the next step for our task force is creating some additional educational materials and case studies for building owners to kind of raise awareness about the opportunity here. And I guess I'll just end by saying we're super grateful to HG and the whole AEG team. I think the clean energy transition is obviously a really tough nut to crack and can be demoralizing sometimes. And a lot of it is about being deep in the permitting weeds and fire code amendments and things like that. But what AEG helps us realize is that it's also really about people and personalities and figuring out how we can deconstruct all of our individual silos to all move forward together. So it's been a great experience participating in this journey with AEG for the last year, and we're really grateful to you, HG, for everything that you did to facilitate that.
Oh, Claudia, it's been a pleasure and truly an honor to support the leadership on something so important. New York's clean energy future that's affordable and safe will not happen unless we really optimize the proliferation of batteries within buildings across New York City and beyond. So it's incredibly important work what you do. And I just want to acknowledge how through your leadership and those working with you on the task force, how you were able to enroll more leaders in being engaged in the topic. I do believe this will be a matter of mobilization, of getting people inspired to hold themselves accountable together to do what's not being done. And you're doing that with this task force and everybody who's engaged. And you can see it in the energy of the task force and what it's being able to accomplish more and more effortlessly because enough of the right people are engaged. You're having the right people in the right roles who can step in and say, oh, I got that piece. Oh, that I can do that. That's my strength. So it's been very exciting to watch and see, and I'm looking forward to the next 90-day sprint. Congratulations, Claudia, and to your task force for getting this 90-day win.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, I'm going to pivot over here and bring people over. We have a special treat here from Puerto Rico. We run Puerto Rico Energy Week. This will be our third or fourth year running it. It's a 5-day series of challenges at the community level, municipal level, and island-wide level in Puerto Rico. And we get to do it with such an incredible group of leaders who inspire me every time to lean in and do more. They don't have the luxury of waiting. Hurricane season comes every year, and it's happening right now. And there's too much at stake not to find ways to work together and deliver life-changing impact. So the opportunity to support these leaders holds a special place in my heart and for my team as well. So please join me in welcoming next to the program. We're going to bring up Angel Zayas. He's the founder of an engineering firm he runs, which is doing incredible work. He is a microgrid leader in Puerto Rico, very generous with his time and knowledge, and also just an incredible inspiration to many up-and-coming engineers across Puerto Rico. Had an opportunity to work with him and his son on this most recent trip. Let me get him set up here to come on board to talk to us. So please join me in welcoming Angel Zayas. Welcome, Angel. Great to have you with us.
Hey, hi, Aishi and everybody. So thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you. You stood up with CP Smith and said that you were going to run this task force. It's called the Microgrid Development Task Force. Talk a little bit why this was important and what you all were able to achieve.
Yes, well, first of all, if you haven't heard about Puerto Rico, we have a lot of energy challenges. After Hurricane Maria 2017, our electrical system was devastated about 80%. We have all generation system. Everything is like we have a big, huge opportunity to move forward on the energy, environment. And the governor has talked about a crisis on energy. So she signed for a executive order to allow for everything related to energy for the main utilities, especially fossils and generation on fossil, to be kind of like a crisis management and have permitting and moving forward with everything related to energy. So on one hand, that's positive, but on the other hand, we didn't see in that executive order anything related to microgrids, anything related to moving forward with microgrid. And when we talk in this Puerto Rico Energy Week about microgrids, we talk about that we have that executive order, that we have a law since 2019 that says specifically that any essential services such as police, hospital, communications, and everything shall be expedited and shall be approved and work out quickly in permitting process. So we do have microgrids as one customer, no problem. We got regulation, but then in terms of multiple customer microgrid, we don't have a regulation. And everything, if you submit something that we've been doing this for more than a year and a half, we don't get the results that we want to get approved a multiple customer microgrid, meaning that there's got to be different point of interconnection. And if there's an outage, electrical outage, you can isolate that area to cover critical facilities, to cover multifamilies or families dwelling units in remote areas that can last more than 6 months, 9 months, as we live after Maria. There were areas that didn't have electricity for more than 12 months. So that's on our, in our plan to look forward to get this regulation that has been in place, a draft regulation for multiple customers for more than 4 years or 5 years now, and nothing has happened. So we can recognize that the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau has a lot in their plates, a lot of projects and urgency. So microgrids, that is really critical for us, is set aside. It's not really one of the top energy needs that we're looking. So what we proposed was, why don't we work within this year as a group, as a team, on working on the regulation, on giving the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau another extension of people that really want, that have the passion to work with this and provide the necessary draft or changes to that draft, so we can have a microgrid regulation that could cover multiple customers. And that's how this group just came out from the Puerto Rico Energy Week. We have people from LUMA, the utility, on that working group, stakeholders, other microgrid communities, us, that we are a energy provider in Puerto Rico in terms of design and permitting. And there's this group that you see here. So it came out, and I just remember, HG, you saying, we know that's the goal for a year, but what can happen in 90 days? And that's really was a tough goal, because we want in 90 days at least the key stakeholders, the key government agencies in one place to talk about what we have today, what we want in the future, where are the draft Puerto Rico regulation on microgrids, and how can we solve this within the next 9 months. And we have had that meeting, as you show in the previous picture.
Here you go.
About
This was
2
the
weeks
90-day
ago.
sprint.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, where we had like 30, 40 persons, and we have the utility LUMA with around 8 persons, 8 team
Nice.
members. We have the OGPE, that's a governmental agency that deals with all the other agencies for permitting. We have the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau out there too.
Nice.
And we have stakeholders. So we talk about the process, what we have today. And you see that flow chart
Yes.
that covers like the full room of walls, because there's a lot of small flow charts to cover that draft regulation. And we said, let's simplify this, and we are here just to help. And we got the comments, suggestion, even from the same agencies, LUMA, from the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, and from the OGPE, just to get things moving forward. And that's what we got on that 90-day sprint. So it was great having that meeting on that day.
It was so exciting to see the post about this from CP and see the room filled like this and and know that DDAC, the Department of Economic Development for Puerto Rico, hosted the event with
Yes.
Geraldo, right? And the team,
Yes.
which is another major partner for us to be able to do Puerto Rico Energy Week. so
Actually, that helps a lot. Let me tell you, because we engaged them to be the sponsor for this event, and we push forward just to get this place, which is from the DDEC.
it's amazing when you start coming together and really seeing one another as your teammates to deliver important wins. And this is one that I was especially excited to see. Great to see you and CP up there leading the charge with your team and staff. Very excited to hear next steps and how we can keep the momentum.
And just to let you know, the team that brings CP are students too.
That's right.
That are working from the Department of Energy with a program that they have, and those kids are really great. They dig into the details of that draft and really help us to understand the whole concept. So it's a full effort, teamwork that we came out from that Puerto Rico Energy Week, and we met every week or every other week just to get this meeting in 90 days, and we just helped just to get it. And now we are just having the communication in the newspapers about this meeting and just pushing from all sides just to make this happen.
I'm so grateful that you had a moment to come and share the progress. And if those watching have not participated in Puerto Rico Energy Week, I highly recommend it. It'll be some of the most meaningful work that you do. It certainly has been that for myself and my team. We're back in March 9th to the 13th, Puerto Rico Energy Week 26. And we are planning to come in conjunction with the CESA Summit in October so that we can have a mini Puerto Rico Energy Week reunion. So look forward to continuing to support your work, Angel. My best to everyone that was involved with this. Congratulations on your 90-day sprint. I do have your jersey here. It's coming your way, right? Puerto Rico Energy
That's good,
Week.
man.
Yeah, I had to get the special one for you. It's on the way. So congratulations on accomplishing that great win. It's perfect, very important, good timing. Hurricane season is coming. We need to get these things right. Lives are at stake. So thank you for joining. I'm going to make sure we wrap up here. As I mentioned earlier, I thought it would be good just to kind of finish things off here is to go ahead and Edgar, if I have you for one more minute just to come back. We've made our way through the first Carbon League halftime show, and it's time to get back on the field as these teams and play the second half of the year. If you don't mind being our coach for the second half, give us some words of wisdom or inspiration to get back on the field and play to win for our next 6 months here. Oh, we got to get you. Sorry, let me get your audio working.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah, as we continue to discuss and talk about the 90-day sprint, let's also look at what does a one-day sprint look like. You can't win the next 90 without owning the next 24.
All right. That's strong words. We got to honor the next.
We can't win. The 90 is important, but how can we own the 24?
Yeah.
And
individually and collectively, right?
Mm-hmm. Individually and collectively, because it does matter, and that's, HG, the one thing that every NFL locker room has is a locker. And the average teams that I've been around, when they get to their locker before the game, after the game, especially as they're trying to navigate through that next thing, the average teams, when they go sit at their locker, the first thing they do is they go sit out. They sit out and they look out. They look out at everyone else. The best teams I've been around, when they go to their locker, the first thing they do is they sit inside their locker and they look in. They look in and say, what else am I capable of? What else are we capable of? And we cannot win the next 90 without owning the next 24. How can we own the next 24?
How can we own the next 24? I like that. I'm going to take that for myself. Look, this is our first halftime show for all those leaders on 200 leaders on task forces right now. I support you, and I encourage you to think about the next 24 hours. How can we make this hour turn into a massive impact Great words to get back on the field with. Special thanks to everyone for participating in this Carbon League halftime show. I look forward to seeing you on the field. Go to our Luma calendar. You'll see all of our upcoming events. Subscribe. We have an incredible lineup. Q3 begins next week in the DMV with a massive lineup. We are nearly sold out. And from there, we go to Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and beyond. So thanks to everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again on our next show.